Hey everybody, I'm Jack Reeder with Future Pastimes. I'm a designer on Dune themed games and expansions, and this is Battle Language, which is a roundtable format for discussing Dune. And we have a kind of an unusual episode here. We're going to be talking about the artwork for Expansion 3 and to some degree Expansion 2 as well, as I'm joined by the artists for that. And full disclosure, the artist on Expansion 2, Solveig Rita, that is my daughter, and the artist on Expansion 3, Solveig Rita, and Lochen Rita, that's my son. These are my adult twins. They're both artists, and they're both fans of Dune to varying degrees. And how did they get this gig? Well, it started back. The artwork for the base game was done by artist Ilya, and he had that art was available, and Gale Force 9 licensed it so that they could get the game to print relatively quickly. And he did do the art on Expansion 1, the Ixians and Tleilaxu expansion. And we had talked to him about doing art on Expansion 2, and initially he was receptive to that, but then we kind of lost communication with him. And to this day, we're not really 100% sure what has happened. I certainly hope that he's okay, and maybe he's just got more important things to do than do the artwork. So we were well behind on our schedule for getting Expansion 2 to print. And Gale Force 9 was like, well, we got to find another artist. And so I happened to know one. And so I had Solvi do a little preview art, kind of an audition. She did a portrait of the head of Chon, Melina Aru, and in Ilya's style. And Gale Force 9 said, sold. It looks great. Have her do it. And there was quite a bit of art in Expansion 2. And she had to do that very quickly, and she had me breathing over her shoulder the whole time, saying, no, change this and do this, which I loved as a designer, having more input. We definitely went back and forth with Ilya on a couple of things, most notably the look of Prince Romber, who is a cyborg. And I was never really satisfied with how that turned out. And I think Ilya was like, I'm not changing it anymore at this point. So, and now that's fine for him. It was just a matter of taste. But I had more control and power over Solvi, so I had her do my bidding. But I didn't really have to. I didn't feel like I had to do that. Let me ask you, Solvi, was I a taskmaster? Was I constantly making unnecessary changes?
You were not. You were not. I think you were completely reasonable.
Yeah, I'm not sure that you feel like you can answer honestly, and so maybe offline you'll be like, "Thanks a lot, Dad." Couldn't say what I really thought. No, I mean I feel like I was being pretty reasonable, and we didn't have a lot of time. We were under the gun. We had to get that stuff out, but you did a great job, I thought. So I'm gonna show a little bit. It's like the portraits here. We were able to add some more people of color to it, which I felt was lacking, and so we got some more of that in there. We had a little bit of flexibility with that, and some interesting characters. And right while we were doing that was when the Duke of Caladan book came out, and we really got information on some of these leaders of Chom, like President Francos Aru, his sister Lady Jalma, some of these other characters in the High Council. And it was good to put names on there. And there was very little description, but of what they looked like. But I think you did a good job of not only capturing Ilya's style, but also leaving your own signature look to your art is in there. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. Well, thank you, first of all. And yeah, I think it was a fun challenge for me to try to capture Ilya's art style. My own typical art style is definitely more painterly. There's less line work overall, but Ilya's style definitely emphasizes line work. So I had a lot of fun creating a brush in Photoshop that I felt like was close to some of the brushes that he was originally using, and then studying his portraits very closely to try to get that style match as seamless as possible. I didn't want expansions 2 and 3 to feel like they were done by a completely different artist, and for it to be jarring. I wanted it to be a cohesive look. Um, and there are a couple of key things that differentiated my style generally from Ilya's. The way we draw noses is a little different, and the way we draw some other facial features. But sort of nailing down those things really helped bring it all together, I think.
Yeah, and I think Gale Force 9 ultimately was pretty happy with how it worked out because they went ahead and at that point we were already designing expansion 3, so they were like, yeah, let's just have Solveig do the art for expansion 3. But one of the big components for expansion 3 here is the homeworlds, and for that, I think you and I both agreed that a good fit for doing the art on the homeworlds was your brother, who's also an artist, has a real passion for astronomy, and had already been doing a lot of planetary artwork for a little project that he and I were working on. I had designed this card game called Space Frontiers, and I had done the artwork myself. I did the planets, but then Lochen was like, "I want to redo all of those planets," and he did an even better job. So Lochen, I'm going to turn it over to you and ask you what it was like working on the artwork for Expansion 3, kind of with your sister to some degree. But, again, I was the common denominator there. You're still living at our house. And so I was able to just constantly go, yeah, let's do this. What were your thoughts? What was that like?
Working on expansion 3 was great. I'd say the hardest part was the beginning because I had to figure out a style that all of the planets would be drawn in. And initially, I wanted to use Grand Designer to give them a more realistic look, but I only got as far as I think Caladan, Wallach 9, and Gidi Prime when you were like, I think we could go for a different style that's more akin to the board game. And
Yeah, you
so,
did do a couple of different versions. We actually I had you do three different versions of Caladan, and a couple of versions on those other two planets that you mentioned, so that we could. I showed it to the play testers, and we tried to get some consensus on what was a good style. Because it's interesting, with Ilya's approach, and we were still kind of using that as our barometer. You've got the style of art for like the leaders. So, showing here some of the Ixian leaders. This is Ilya's style here, and the box cover is a similar style, but not quite the same. And then even on some of the treachery cards, where it's its own style. It's a different style. This kind of silhouette style that in some cases have got some interesting details in it. So they're not all the exact same style. They're not really far apart. But we wanted to try to stay in that ballpark in terms of the aesthetics. And I think that what we settled on really works. So they all these planets have a real distinctive flavor and look to them. It's not photorealistic like some of the other planet art that I've seen you do, but I thought it really worked out, and it was a lot of fun for me to collaborate with you on what the looks were. So what do you remember about that once we settled on a style?
well, I think one of the biggest sources of inspiration for that style was the cover artwork, where you could see both of the moons and how
Yeah.
they have that sort of minimalist color palette feel. And that's kind of what I wanted to do for each of the worlds, as well as using a couple like air spray brushes, like for the clouds of a couple different planets. Uh, I wanted to be as faithful to like what descriptions were there for each world, while also making them feel unique and have them stand out. And I feel like I did a pretty good job with that.
Yeah, one of the other things that we played around with was a kind of a color association, and that is more readily
Yeah.
evident if you look at the planet cards themselves, the homeworld cards, where you're seeing the homeworld sort of in situ, so it's in space. So, for instance, the Emperor's color is red, so we've got a red star on Seleucus Secundus with some red nebula, and red nebula as well with a red moon there for Kitane. And that's a little bit subtle, but all of the other systems have got those same color cues. So Grumman had the light blue. Gidi Prime is black, so They get the nice gray, the artificial moon for Rich S, which I think you did a great job with that as well. Because it looks like a moon, but if you look closer, you're like, oh yeah, I can see how that is uh, a
Stitched
man-made
together.
artifice. You get the blue of Wallach 9. Junction is interesting for a couple of reasons. One, of course, is just the art on the planet itself. Is you've got all of these landing
Cities.
strips as well as the cities, and
Yeah, that's one of my favorites.
it almost looks like a navigation console of some kind. So that looks great. And then you had the Easter egg there on the card with the three different types of highliners. Through the
Yep.
years, the really old one. You've got a Lynch movie highliner on there. You've got a highliner on
And
the
then
right is based on the one that Ilya did
the card.
on the card, and of course we've got a
Yeah, right
nice
over here.
Villeneuve highliner there as well. So a little something for everybody. You got a nice little pink glow there for Ecaz, some green nebula for Caladan. The Tleilax is also a nod to the Lynch movie because they're right at the very beginning. Paul is looking through the film book and he's like,
Right.
Tleilax, home of the Bene Tleilaxu and the Mentats, and they showed the planet with all these moons, and so we were like, oh, that's too good. Same thing with Kitane. That's certainly right out of Lynch as well. Tupile, the description there came from that book on Chom, and then of course Arrakis, where you do have the two moons. You've got the Hand of God and Muad'Dib moons there as well. So it's not quite the same as the moons on the cover, which I'm fine with. And, that's maybe the other side, or it rotates. Probably doesn't rotate. But yeah, it was just, I think it's great. It's for me, I love having these physical tokens in the game, and you put your forces on there. And I'm going to put the Ixians on Tleilax just as kind of like a bit of irony. I mean, it was the Tleilaxu that actually invaded Ix. But yeah, it's just so satisfying for me as a player to see those on there. And so, what was your reaction, Locken, when we opened up the box and you got to see your artwork published on the cards and
Oh,
on the tokens?
that was I was so happy. Like seeing all of them just like physically there, it's just it it paid off really well. I had a great time making all of these. Funny enough, Arrakis I wanted to make last because I wanted to get a flow for each of the worlds and like refine my skills so that when I finally did come to Arrakis, I wanted it to be the best one, or at least one of the best ones.
Yeah, it's hard for me to pick a favorite because I really like, I love playing the Emperor and having the two homeworlds, which I think is just awesome. With the Sardaukar and Seleucia. Oh, that's Tupile.
That's
Sardaukar and
two pile.
Seleucia, yeah. And then the
There you go.
Kitane, just this giant, ringed planet, just having that on the board. As Gale Force 9 did a great job of, sizing and getting those. They were excited about this as well. This kind of sold them on the expansion 3, just this idea alone. But, then I look at it, like I look at Ecaz and I'm like, oh, this is great. But then I'm like, oh, two pile. And I was like, but Ix, oh my God, Ix.
Ix.
And then you're
Ix
like,
was one of my favorites
yeah,
to
it's
make
just
along with Junction. Yeah.
so,
I
so
Junction might be my favorite. I think it's so stunning.
yeah, there's a lot I like about it. So let's shift over there. There's a good deal of art in this expansion, so there was plenty for Solvi to do. We had some fun with the leaders in the Ecaz and Moritani expansion. And so, yeah, I want you to talk a little bit about the different leaders and what that process was like, and the little bits of details that you were thrilled about, or maybe not so thrilled about that I required you to do, but based on the again what little descriptive text there is in those books that gives us something to go on. So yeah, talk about that, Solv.
Absolutely. So for for expansion two, I did all of the artwork for that in about a month, maybe 2 months at most. So it was an incredibly quick turnaround. So when it came to expansion three, when it was time to do the leader discs, I was glad to have a little bit more time to really get into some more fine detail, add a couple, more elaborate outfits, or what have you, and really take a little bit more time with each of the portraits. I think the most frustrating portrait was definitely Gru Kronos. I remember we went back and forth on his beard for maybe 2 weeks because it's described as having lit embers in it. And I was like, how on earth am I supposed to draw that? um, and I think we made it work. Despite all the back and forth, and I remember we also talked a lot about giving him this sort of crazed, almost manic expression. He's supposed to
Yeah.
be this very intense
I mean,
military
yeah,
character.
I think you nailed that. And and they described the
Well, thank
crazy
you.
earring that he has as well. And so I was
Yes,
like,
yes,
well, they described it. We got to include that. And so that that's it. And then Trin Kronos is his son, and you can definitely
right.
see family resemblance. So I think that you did a good job with that.
Thank
His
you.
beard's not long enough yet to put to set on fire,
The light on fire.
but
Yeah.
Baby step.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, and then I think he Resser, he's a sword master, and we thought it would be fun to give him a little scar on his eyebrow, as probably got that training with swords, um,
Exactly.
and so that was a fun little detail. And of course, we do have two sword masters. Get Whitmore Blood, who's described as having that birthmark, and so that's a nice little detail. And then Rivi Denari is described as quite a character. This just really big guy with his bandana and his epaulets, and and so you got all those
I know
details
there's
in
a lot
there.
of description. Yep.
And
Yeah, and for the sword masters, we wanted to give them not matching outfits, but almost as though it's a uniform. It's an indicator of their status as sword masters. So they're both wearing this red and gold,
yeah,
and you can just see the very corner on Whitmore Blood of a sort of emblem on his chest as like a sword master,
yeah,
embroidered
and
piece.
that is also, it's kind of right out of the leader skill. The image
Yep,
there and the
yep.
leader skill is somebody, and they're holding the swords. One's pointed up, one's pointed down. And so yeah, it's a nice connection to that a lot of people probably haven't noticed until now, or pointing it out.
Well, it's quite small, but
Yeah, well, and you can barely see it. So yeah, but and then we've got everyone's favorite Duke, Prad Vidal, and this has
yes.
been like with a lot of the people that I played this expansion with, they really like Prad Vidal's look. He looks like a shifty, untrustworthy, conniving guy, which he is. And so I think you did a really good job with that. He looks, I mean, it's just how I imagined him when I was reading the book. And in fact, he shows up in a couple of the books. But yeah, I just would, talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. Well, thank you, first of all. But yeah, I felt it was very important to give him this extreme side glance, like he's, checking behind his shoulder, he schemes. And then I think the other thing that really makes it is this sort of slicked back, greasy hair. Gives him a more villainous vibe. The Widow's Peak, of course, is definitely a little bit ominous. And yeah, I just wanted him to look sketchy and conniving. And I'm glad that that came through.
Oh yeah, you nailed it.
So there's some
Thank
other
you.
there's some other art in here. So I've got out the terror tokens because that was a whole process as well. They have these tokens that they can place that have effects, and we wanted some distinct icons for them. You still like, especially when you're learning it, you got to look up what does this one do. This one has perplexed a lot of people, and it's the assassination
Yes, and
one.
we had a lot of back and forth about that one because it is a direct reference to a scene from one of the Brian Herbert books, and obviously not as many people have read those books. I have not personally read the Brian Herbert books, but it is a reference to a specific weapon that's used, and I'll let you talk a little bit
Yeah,
more
I
about
mean
that.
it's it were these decorations for a wedding that were like flower pots that were hexagonal shaped, and then they secretly launched these hexagon shaped blades that would chop people up. And a lot of people are like, oh, they expect this token here with the dagger. Well, that must be assassination, and they're like, oh, what is this one
Nope.
then? And and so yeah, and even like the extortion. That's what this one is extortion.
Well,
But
and that's
the
the other
other
thing
one,
is that, all the terror tokens are these nasty things. And it's like, well, I feel as though there's only so many ways to depict extortion and assassination and all of these terrible things that they're doing.
yes,
What do you
robbery.
think?
I think the breaking gears, that's sabotage, right?
Yeah, that seems to
Yeah,
work.
that's my favorite.
That's the
I
root
like that.
word
I
of
thought that came out
sabotage.
well.
Yeah, yeah. On the sneak attack, I think we used your ornithopter art from expansion 2, and
Yes.
that was great.
Yep.
And then Tomix looks
Can't
great
imagine
too.
what that one is.
Yeah, that works out. And of course,
Yes.
Lochen, we had Lochen do the after effects, which is basically a holdover from some of the looks of Seleucia. So Seleucia just ravaged by atomics. That's why it looks this way. So we're like, yeah, we just need to use some of that artwork. And of course, so we had the cover of the box was an original piece, and
Yes.
it's got some clear references to the expansion. Why don't you touch on that?
Absolutely. I think obviously we just talked about atomics, and you can see the atomic explosion in the background, and I think that is one of the most fun parts of the cover. I was really pleased with how it came out, but it does give the expansion this really intense. You look at just the box cover and you're like, oh, I cannot wait to see what kind of things you can get up to with this expansion.
Yeah,
Um, but then the other thing going on, of course, is this Fremen shrine that's being highlighted on the cover. And those of you with a keen eye will notice that that is actually also featured on the Karama cards in the game.
exactly. And it's connected to one of the other components, which are the discovery tokens. So you've got the shrine
Exactly.
is a discovery token, and it's a reference to the shrine on the cover, which has a connection to the Karama art from the original Avalon Hill. That's what all these symbols are around it, and it's that same kind of thing. So the idea with the shrine, of course, is you can use a truth trance as a Karama and vice versa. So you've got the truth trance silhouette with the Karama around it, and that was pretty fun to have that in there. The other thing, of course, is that the art on the high reg tokens is an Easter egg as well, which I've mentioned in another video, but this is right off of the cover of I by Frank Herbert, which is
Yes.
a collection of short stories, the first of which is a Dune story. And the cover shows a Fremen, and they've got a little piece of Fremen jewelry that has this a similar looking logo there. So we thought that would be a fun Easter egg to include. And then, of course, we got the null entropy box from expansion 2 is used on these smuggler tokens for storing goodies. Got the ornithopter again, and then you did original artwork for the Orgese processing station, which is also from the Duke of Caladan series. We've got our basically our ecological testing station, which you did, and then the cistern as well. So that was fun. And then you did 3 treachery cards so that we could get the treachery cards up to 50, a nice even number. And this has also been kind of famously referred to by our playtesters and others as the 3 friends, since you've got these 3 characters who are going on their adventures. They get recruited, so they're there. They come in as reinforcements, and then they harass and they withdraw. And I know that one of my playtesters, Jaded, who's a frequent guest here on Battle Language, is like, where is the 3rd friend on the cover? Is he setting off the atomics? Is he taking the photograph? We're like, yeah, maybe we should have put 3 Fremen up there. But yeah, that was just fun doing that. And any other insights or little pearls of trivia that you want to share on the 3 friends, Sylv?
Oh, I mean, I was so pleased when I heard that the playtesters were referring to them as the 3 friends. I thought it was really sweet that they had noticed that there were these 3 sort of recurring characters in the treachery cards.
Yeah, I believe that
and if you look closely, it is the same.
Yeah, I
Thank God.
believe I described it as I want you to use the 3 cheap heroes, and so there are
Exactly,
3 cheap
exactly.
heroes in the game. There's 2 male, 1 female, and they're just silhouettes.
There they are.
And here, it's a little bit more of your style of the silhouette, which you also had in the leader skills from expansion 2. Same kind of aesthetic there, but yeah, I think it works. It's like, all right, what can we have these cheap heroes doing? that that signifies their recruits or their reinforcements or their harassing and withdrawing. So, yeah, I think that turned out really well, and I was quite pleased with that. And I like those cards a lot. I like that they're all green cards, but two of them are you put in your battle plan, so they're a little bit special there. And yeah, so I think it's been great having you guys work on these expansions, and they recently announced the Kwisatz Haderach edition, and that it's going to include another expansion. And what I will say is that Solveig is still working on artwork for that, and my hope is that the campaign itself will allow for other things like add-ons or stretch goals or stuff like that could eventually mean some additional factions, which I would love to see Solveig do the leaders for. And if we have more factions, we're going to need more homeworlds, Lochen. So I hope you're up for the task of coming up with art for hopefully a couple of new homeworlds. How does that grab you?
My body is ready.
All right. Well, I guess that's an important. Use your mind too. But yeah, is there anything else you guys want to say? This is a relatively short battle language, which I think will be good. But I thought it would be fun to showcase the artwork and to talk a little bit more about what was going on. We do have the actually I can show the shields for the leaders. So we've got Hundro Moritani, the head of the House Moritani. And then, of course, we have the Archduke. And you can't tell from this illustration which arm he's missing. So it's because the book doesn't say. So it's kind of interesting how that worked out. But, yeah, I was just real happy with the artwork. I love seeing the physical components for the game. And like I said, any last words from you guys?
Yeah. I can't obviously say much about what I'm working on for expansion 4, but you guys are going to love it. I've been super excited, and you guys are just gonna lose your minds, I think, when you see the art that's coming.
Yeah. Well, that is it. If you watch this, if you've got any questions about the art or the process, or anything else related to expansions 2 or 3, let us know in the comments. Let us know what you think of the art. Hopefully you like it as much as we do. And if you got any other insights or stuff, let us know in the comments. I want to thank Lochen and Solveig for joining me on this episode of Battle Language. It's taken, they're my own family. It's taken a while for us to align the stars to have this conversation, but yeah, I'm glad to do it, and I enjoy working with them. And if every piece of art that Solveig sells is less money that we have to just give her to live on her own. So I'm gonna keep hustling to try to get you guys gigs as artists, so that you're making your own living and not sponging off of your mom. So that's it for this episode, everybody. Thanks for watching, and we will see you again soon.